Oh, well, how y'all doing? Oh, I know y'all not tired because I got up at 6 a.m. this morning in Detroit, okay? And then flew to Delaware, got in the car to Philadelphia, now I'm here. So how y'all doing this evening? All right. Well, again, my name is Symone Sanders, and I am so happy and excited to be with you tonight. I just want to thank you all for the invitation this evening. I know this is a celebration. You'll have an installation. Can we give another round of applause for these musical selections? I was over there like, oh, we can have another song. But I know we need to get to the program. So the theme tonight is building Black wealth through home ownership. You know, I am a firm believer of not coming in and telling people what they already know. And this is a room of people. I don't have to come to you and talk to you about Black home ownership and Black wealth, because I think y'all know that already. I have had the privilege since 2016 to travel the country, then with Senator Sanders. After that, I started my own business, and I served as a CNN political commentator and did some additional Democratic consulting. And now I have the privilege of working with Vice President Biden as his senior advisor. Thank you. And since 2016, I do a lot of speaking engagements. I do a lot of college campuses, especially. And I travel the country. If you read some of my bio, it talks to you that I used to do juvenile justice work. Some people like to say that I'm a Black Lives Matter activist. I don't know what that means. I like to joke that I'm not an actual activist. I just played one on television. But I am somebody that believes in reform and believes we have to use our voices to do something. And I go around the country, particularly to these college campuses, and to rooms and various spaces and places with fancy folks like yourselves to talk about being a radical revolutionary. And I think tonight, especially as we talk about home ownership, increasing Black home ownership, I don't have to tell y'all the numbers. The Census Bureau data just came out, I would say a couple weeks ago, that said Black home ownership is the lowest it has ever been in 50 years. When I talk about, I think right now what we need, from politics to education to business to home ownership and everywhere in between, is a few more radical revolutionaries in the work. In an article that I recently read talking about the lowest rate in 50 years for Black home ownership, one of the analysts who was quoted said that's why we have to step up enforcement of the Fair Housing Act, because that is the answer to increasing Black home ownership. And one could argue it is. And I think a lot of people forget, maybe not folks in this room, but when people were talking about fair housing 51 years ago, one of the leading voices in that fight was Dr. King. Post-Civil Rights Act of 1964, Civil Rights Act of 1965, Dr. King turned his hour in his ear. The civil rights movement looked to the North because, as y'all may know, the issues in the North are just a little bit different than the issues in the South, but racism is still racism. And so Dr. King took his fight and he started talking about things about economic inequality. They weren't calling it the Black wealth gap then, but that's exactly what it was. He started talking about fair housing, eradicating the slums. And some of those same folks that worked with Dr. King in the civil rights leadership in 1964 and 1965 to pass this legislation, some of these same members of Congress could not be bothered when Dr. King came talking about eradicating the slums. They couldn't be bothered when he came to talk about fair housing. Dr. King, in my opinion, was a radical revolutionary. And there's a few tenets of radical revolutionary leadership that I think we need to talk about tonight, because I think everybody in this room, it's incumbent upon us to be some radical revolutionaries, because the reality is, I was sitting with the current president earlier, and he was telling me that the Urban Institute has data that says there are 1.7 million millennials in this country that are mortgage ready. So if 1.7 million millennials in this country are mortgage ready, I'm a millennial, I'm 29 years old. But Black home ownership is low. These are Black millennials, correct, right? 1.7 million Black millennials. Black. But Black home ownership is the lowest it's ever been in 50 years. There's a disconnect. And I would argue that the radical revolutionary act of the people in this room should be to help close that gap. That's your radical revolutionary act, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I know when I talk about radical revolutionary, some of y'all think I'm talking about going to the die-in and you know, laying your body on the line at the protest, and I'm gonna tell you I'm not doing that for a number of reasons. I just told y'all I'm not an actual activist, I play one on television. But if I'm at the die-in getting arrested with the real protesters, my friends like Brittany Packnett and DeRay McKesson, folks like Tef Poe, I couldn't be on television explaining to America why the people were dying in. My radical revolutionary act is to translate and explain what was happening in the streets of America for people that do not get it, for folks that do not understand, for people that do not have a direct connection. Now my radical revolutionary act is to help get somebody elected president of the United States of America. But ladies and gentlemen, your radical revolutionary act, your charge, in my opinion, is to help close that gap. It's to bring young millennials like myself into the fold. People say, well, why aren't millennials buying? What is it they need to do? We don't know. Y'all think I'm playing? I pay 2 rents in DC and Philadelphia. Shout out to the Philly people. Okay? There are young people in this country who work real good jobs every day, who go to work, who want to own, but they do not know how. Young millennials. But people sit in rooms such as these in places all over the country and say, we don't care, we ain't ready, we just don't want to start families, that's why we're not buying. We don't know. Your radical revolutionary act is to help us close that gap. Let me tell you, one tenet of radical revolutionary leadership, ladies and gentlemen, is being willing to do some of the things that have not been done before. You know, Dr. King was a radical revolutionary leader that did some things that haven't been done before. Radical revolutionary leadership requires you to step out of the box, requires you to think differently. Radical revolutionary leadership means maybe we don't do that program we did last year. Maybe we don't put the money where we usually put it because it ain't yielded no results in 15 years, and we keep doing it because somebody just likes the program. Oh, maybe not the people in this room. Radical revolutionary leadership means maybe we bring some other people to the table. Radical revolutionary leadership, and how do we get some of these 1.7 million millennials who are mortgage ready? Perhaps we should bring them into the room. Radical revolutionary leadership requires us to do some things that have not been done before. Increasing black home ownership is, I think, one of the fundamental challenges in our society because it speaks to so many different things. None of this happens in a vacuum. The issues in housing are directly related to the issues in our economy, which are directly related to issues in education, which are directly related to the issues that we see at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. None of this happens in a vacuum. So y'all stepping into your roles as radical revolutionary leaders in this room is necessary. Necessary for the progress we say we want to see in the next 50 years in this country. Regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, this is an inflection moment. So we have to be willing to do some things that haven't been done before. We got to be willing to talk to some different people. We got to be willing to let some young people lead. Somebody asked me, people are always asking me, I told y'all I'm a millennial, I'm about to stand for the millennials real quick, but then I'm about to come for the millennials too, hold on. I'm gonna hold them accountable in a second. But people are always asking me, how do we get young people to engage? How do we get them in the room? We just don't know. You might need to pass that baton. But young people, okay, we cannot just sit around and wait for somebody to pick us. Yeah. I got truth for everybody in the room today. We can just not sit around and wait for somebody to pick us. We can't sit in our corners or in our group chats, in our signal groups, at our brunches, and talk about what's wrong and talk about how the leadership of X organization don't never let us in to do nothing except do the young people photo op. We can't just talk about it. We need to be about the work. We need to pull our chairs up to the table. We need to raise our hands, and when they don't pick us, we need to just do the work anyway. It's a myth. It is a myth that if you just put your head down and do the work, that people will pick you. That's a lie. That is a lie we have told a generation of young people. You know, but if I just put my head down and did the work, nobody was going to pick me. When I left the campaign in 2016 of my own volition, and after I worked at convention, Democratic National Convention Committee as a consultant, I was still doing TV, and I thought I was going to go work on Hillary Clinton's campaign, and it didn't work out. But I was still doing television. People were still calling me to do TV. And I realized that I was going to the studio for free and everybody else was getting paid. It was nice that they would send in the car to pick me up and everything, but I would like to get a check because at the time I had no job. I'm staying in my mama's sorority sister's guest room. Still going to my Links meeting though, but like, okay. So I go and I start having these meetings with these people telling me I need an agent. And I'm like, okay. I start having these meetings, people introduce me, and one of the most prominent agents at one of the top agencies tells me that they don't think I'm palatable enough for cable television. And so I probably won't be getting a contract. And I didn't know if me not being palatable meant I was too big, too black, or too loud. I wasn't sure. But I thought I didn't need to speak to her anymore. I talked to another agent that told me I needed voice lessons because I did not sound like what people were used to hearing when they turned on the television. I said, ma'am, you just told me I don't sound like a middle-aged white woman because those are the people on television, on cable news. So we cannot sit around and wait for somebody to pick us to solve the problem. We can't focus group this thing away. We just have to make a conscious decision to do the work. We gotta be willing to take a risk. We gotta be willing to step out. There are far too many things at stake for us to continue to sit around in our familiar circles with our familiar people and have these familiar conversations. Another tenet of, let me give y'all all my tenets before y'all run me up out of here. I got my bags in the back, okay. Another tenet of radical revolutionary leadership that I think is extremely important in this scenario is we have to take stock of who is being left out of the proverbial building. In 2016, when I served as a press secretary for Senator Sanders, when I first joined the campaign, I would travel with him everywhere, and I would introduce him before the rallies, in addition to my other role is actually being the press secretary. And I stopped introducing him after a while because I was like, I ain't signed up to be the pep rally girl. But when I first got there for about 2 months, we would go places, and this is pre-Secret Service, y'all. Let me tell you, Secret Service makes your life so much easier. Vice President Biden does not have Secret Service now, but some days I wish we did. Secret Service makes sure you eat. They make sure you leave on time. You riding in a big body. Everybody get out. We feel good. Everybody know where everybody's at. You got your little hard pin. Good. No Secret Service. In 2016, we was rolling around in a Chevy Cruze, just trying to get there. They don't even make them no more. That's another speech. But anyway, this is in the Chevy Cruze stage of the campaign in 2016, so we're rolling around trying to get in there. And I have to go separately from the senator because I can't show up when you show up and do my job. I got to show up before you. So I roll up, and everywhere we went for a week, all over places, and this happened in places all over America, everywhere we went for a week, I would show up, and I would have to call someone to come down to wherever the door was to validate that I was, so I said I was because they wouldn't let me into the building. And I'd be late. No, I didn't tell anybody this was happening, but for a week straight, it happened a week straight. So much so that the Friday evening before our Saturday event, I called up the events team, and those are the people that, go days and sometimes a week before the event to get all the logistics ready. And I said, y'all, can you tell them I'm coming at this time tomorrow? I'll be driving this kind of car, and that I'm bald and that I'm black. And they all start laughing. And they're like, Symone, I said, nope. Y'all usually tell them when I'm coming. You tell them what kind of car I'm driving. And I just had some particular issues this week. So I would appreciate if tomorrow you would let them know, in addition, that I'm bald and that I'm black. They say, fine. Show up the next day, my little Chevy Cruze, okay? There's 3 checkpoints, pull up to the first checkpoint. Man gives me so much trouble. I was like, sir, did they tell you that I was coming? He was like, I only have a Symone Sanders. That is me. You literally have my driver's license. He was like, oh, they did say that you were, I was like, bald and black? Yes, thank you. He's like, yeah. I was like, thank you. Pull up to the second checkpoint, roll my window down. The man was like, oh, they told me about you? I said, thank you, sir. They told you I was bald and I was black. He's like, they did. I pull up to the third checkpoint, which isn't a checkpoint at all. It's just a parking spot with my name on it. It's just like a little sheet of paper, name on it. And I pull into the spot, and I'm getting my items, getting ready to get out of the car, and these two gentlemen come running up to my vehicle that work in the building, telling me that I am not supposed to be parked there, and yelling expletives, telling me to move my car, calling me all other things except my name. And I break down, and I start crying in my car. This has happened all week, and I just want to go to work. I call our security, and our advance people come down. They get me up into the room. The senator and his wife are about 15 minutes behind me. So I pull it together, because I still have to brief him. I still got to go to work. So Senator and his wife, Jane, come in. I start explaining to them what's about to happen. And Jane interrupts me. She said, "What's wrong, Symone?" And I was like, "Oh, some days I just can't get it." I got the ugly cry. And I break down and I tell them the story that I just told y'all with an uglier face and lots more tears. And Senator Sanders interrupts me. He was like, "Well, why can't you get in?" And Jane goes, "Well, racism, Bernie." And I was like, yes. Perhaps a little ageism and sexism too, but yes. And then the senator said something at the moment I thought was so profound and applies to this tenet of radical revolutionary leadership. He said, "Well, if you can't get in," he said, "Well, if you can't get in, who else is being locked out of the building that we don't know about?" The second tenet of radical revolutionary leadership is taking stock of who's being left out of the proverbial building. Because you might have a really good program. That initiative might have been an excellent idea. But who is being adversely affected that we didn't even think about? Who's being negatively affected? Who's being locked out of the proverbial building? We have to take stock of who's not at the table, or even who's at the table that we need to take out remove from the table. It's something about giving up your seat, but it's also something about people telling you your seat's gone. Woo! Y'all, they gave me too much tea before I came up here. Second tenet of radical revolutionary leadership is you have to take stock of who's being left out of the proverbial building. And I say when we had this conversation about home ownership in America, when we're having a conversation about how to build wealth, when we talk about the gap between white families and black families in America, and it's not a gap, it's a chasm. It is a chasm. None of this happens in a vacuum. We have to think about who's being left out of this proverbial building. We have to talk about these young people. The third tenet of radical revolutionary leadership that I might leave y'all with is you have to be willing to take on your adversaries as well as your allies. I'm gonna go back and talk to y'all about Dr. King. Now, everybody want to talk about, people like to talk about Dr. King pre-1965. Fine, we ain't gonna talk about pre-1965 Dr. King. I like post-1965 Dr. King a little bit better. Because he was shaking tables, he's flipping stuff over, he was running up in rooms with people like, "I don't care what you did 2 years ago, tell me about this fair housing." And there were people that told Dr. King he was going too far. Why are you going against these people that helped us pass the Civil Rights Act? Why are you going against these folks that are the only reason why we have the Voting Rights Act? Why are you speaking out against the war? This has nothing to do with black people, because that's what people were saying. Why are you ruffling all these feathers? What do people like to say nowadays? Why are we eating our own? Why are you bringing that up? We have to be willing to take on our adversaries as well as our allies, ladies and gentlemen, if we want to close this gap, if we're really serious about doing this work. We have to be willing to take on, that person that we sit on the board with. Those people we go to brunch with. That donor that keeps our program alive. That person that keeps getting us those tickets. Okay, but not this room. And it's not easy. It's tough stuff. But that is what this moment requires. That's what this moment demands of every single person in America. That was a clappable moment. So, up until April of this year, I was a CNN political commentator. And I think everybody remembers, regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh. And I think also everybody remembers earlier this year, Black History Month, when it was just a really rough Black History Month. I think that's okay for me to say. You know, well, what happened? Let me tell you. Among other things, one Friday, one day into Black History Month, the governor of Virginia is accused of being in blackface or a hood. We still don't know. A couple days later, the Attorney General of Virginia is like, I too have donned blackface at one time, dressing up as Curtis Blow for Halloween. I don't know. And then a couple days later, story comes out where the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia is accused of sexual assault. And then a couple days later, a story comes out and Lieutenant Governor of Virginia is said to have raped someone while he was in college. Well, you know, I know the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. He's a friend of mine. I consider him a brother. I worked to help get him elected. I was one of his consultants on his 2017 campaign. And I was sitting in the studio the day the Washington Post story about the final allegation came out. I was on Jake Tapper's show. And the producer comes in our ears, because that's what happens when they're like, ooh, breaking news. Producer comes in, and we're on commercial break, and he's like, we're going to take the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia's story. The Washington Post story is out. And we've been hearing that this story was coming out for 2 days or so, but I was just hoping it wasn't going to break while I was on TV. Luck would have it. So while we're in the break, everybody's like, wow, you know him, right? Yes, I know him. We come out of the break, we go to a reporter in Virginia, they set up the package, they show the story, people are reading the story. Jake Tapper comes back to the panel and he says, well, Symone, I hate to put you in an awkward position, but you know the Lieutenant Governor, don't you? Yes, Jake. He's a friend? Yes, Jake, yes, he's a friend. I work for him. Well, what do you think? And I said, well, you know, Jake, I do know the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. He's a friend. I consider him a brother, and I helped work to get him elected. But I must say I'm disappointed in the way that he has handled things this week. I'm disappointed in the way that he seemed to disparage the character of the previous women that came out with these allegations. And I think at this point, he has to resign. And Jake goes, I said, but Jake, you know, I also think it's unfortunate that at this time, because at that time it's what it looked like, that the Black Lieutenant Governor of Virginia is going to be the only person that has to suffer the consequences of actions that he has made, because I think the governor needs to resign too. And he was like, what about the Attorney General? I was like, Jake, if you ever wore blackface, if you have ever trafficked in transphobia, homophobia, and all the isms, you got to go. Because public service is a privilege. It ain't like you work at GM. It's a privilege. That it's not a right for anyone to have. Public service is a privilege. And he was like, oh, that's all the time we have. And the show ends. And as I get off the set, I'm getting text messages and emails. Why would you do that? How could you do that? Why would you tear a black man down? It's Black History Month. First of all, I don't need y'all to remind me it's Black History Month. Calls that entire weekend. Why did you feel the need to do that? Well, because truth and social justice and what's right doesn't have an asterisk on it that says, in case I know you, unless you're my friend. And I also don't believe in being a hypocrite. And I sat on that same panel with Jake Tapper at that same table in that same spot not a couple months before during the Kavanaugh hearings. And I talked about, Bill Kristol was like, well, why do you believe the woman? Well, Bill, because I don't think, why do you believe her? Well, Bill, because when I was in college, I had too much to drink one night, and a man whose advances I had previously rebuffed multiple times took advantage of the fact that I couldn't consent. And the next day, he denied raping me, but that's exactly what he did. So that's why I believe her. So I could not sit on that panel at that table months later just because it was somebody that I knew. Sometimes we have to take on our adversaries as well as our allies, our friends, our fraternity brothers, our sorority sisters, our link sisters. The people we see at the Jack and Jill meetings every month. adversaries as well as our allies because this work is too important. And so I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, today, are we really doing the work to close this gap and move the needle? Or are we complacent? Do we feel uncomfortable in the work that we're doing? Because I'm going to tell you, if you don't feel uncomfortable, you're probably not doing this life-changing social justice, close that gap work you think you are. I'm uncomfortable on a regular basis at work, okay? That is what this moment requires. That is how we close the gap. That is how we move the needle, because let me tell you, the same conversations the folks in the civil rights community and Dr. King were having 50 years ago are the same conversations we're having right now, but the way in which they've gone about the work has colored the lives that we live, the way we engage in politics, in housing, in education, in business. And the work that we are doing right now will decide the direction and the lives for folks 50 years from now. This is an inflection point. This is a moment. We cannot miss it, because the moment is going to happen whether we participate or not. This is not a scenario where if you just sit by idly, all of a sudden the gap going to close. Home ownership has dropped. It went down 2% from the last. I don't got to preach to y'all. Y'all know. You know the numbers. So I didn't come in here today to talk to you about the numbers, to give you a history on black home ownership, to give you a rundown of the perils of the housing crisis. I didn't come in here to talk to you about how racism just doesn't happen in a vacuum and it affects housing. You all know that. I came in here to tell you that it is necessary and imperative that you move with a sense of urgency on this issue. That we cannot wait. And if the young people want to be engaged, I just want somebody to tell me how I'm going to buy this house and not make it so stressful for me. I'll leave you with a poem. If you've heard me before, you've heard this poem because I believe it truly illustrates everything that I'm talking about. And it's called The Things That Haven't Been Done Before, and it's a poem by Edgar Guest. And it mentions Christopher Columbus, which is problematic for me, but again, that's another speech, because the only Christopher I would like to acknowledge is Christopher Wallace. But it's a good poem. So it's called The Things That Haven't Been Done Before by Edgar Guest. The things that haven't been done before, those are the things to try. Columbus dreamed of an unknown shore at the rim of a far-flung sky. Though his heart was bold and his faith was strong as he ventured to dangers new, he paid no heed to the jeering throng or the fears of a doubting crew. Many will follow the beaten track with guideposts along the way. They live and have lived for ages back with a chart for every day. Someone has told them it's safe to go on the road they have traveled o'er, and all they ever strive to know are the things that were known before. But few will strike out without map or chart where never a man or woman has been. From the beaten path they draw apart to see what no man or woman has seen. There are deeds they hunger alone to do, though bruised and battered and sore. They blaze a trail for many who do nothing not done before. The things that haven't been done before, the task worthwhile today. Are you one of the flock that follow? Or are you one that shall lead the way? Are you one of the timid souls that quail at the jeers of a shouting crew? Or dare you, whether you win or fail, strike out for a goal that's new? National Association of Real Estate Brokers, I would venture to say, now is the time to make the decision to do the things that have not been done before. We cannot wait, and it's on us. Thank you.